Greetings. I did not expect to be back this soon, but this morning my husband and I were doing a little research on somebody we'd long forgotten about. And I'm going to share that with you because we have been having something of an interesting discussion this morning. If you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tinkemeyer. I used to write a blog called No Longer Quivering for Pathos for 10 years. I dealt with the evangelical Christian world and quiverful in its particularly non-denominational, high-demand religious organizations. And this dude was one of the ones that some of the people that I went to church with just loved. And I never got it because women go, oh, no. He was just not somebody, hey, Grace Peter, you finally called alive again. He was not somebody that I ever paid much attention to. That being said, these are just my opinions and don't bully anybody. And I know you guys won't. You're pretty good about that. I don't have a ton of angry comments, except for when Michelle, you know who, with Michelle Goes Live, decides to show up and spam the comments with silliness. Hey, Angela. So Kevin Copeland was somebody that I initially decided was just like no bueno for me. I was not going to ever have anything to do with him. Hey, Cheryl. But I knew a ton of people that did and didn't. So it was kind of funny. Earlier, we were talking about different things to do with this stuff. And one of the things that my husband and I, is kind of a joke between us, is every now and then somebody will say something and somebody else will go, COVID-19, I blow you away with the wind of God, just like Kenneth Copeland was doing in one of his videos. And there's another one that I absolutely love that somebody has done a remix on, goes, you got to confess that meth. So he says so many just horrible things that a lot of the remix and songify type guys have done that I just have laughed over because it's just absurd, a lot of it, absurdist. The old blab and grab. Yeah, you're right. The blab and grab. So we started talking about him this morning. My husband said, say, so how much is that dude worth? Like I said, this is somebody that we knew of many years ago. And even then, it was kind of on the periphery. There were a few people that we knew supported him, but we did not. So I started by looking up his net worth. That is not available anywhere I can find online. But here's the thing, you know what is available? Speculation on that based on a number of things. And they think it might be as high as $1 billion. $1 billion for ministry, a minister running a ministry. Joke? Well, early on in the COVID, and I have to throw this out. It's been 3 years. We're going into year number 4 of COVID here. Full knee replacement on Tuesday. Oh, Carolyn, I hope that you heal well from that. I'm always kind of, I hear friends doing that. I've started doing yoga, so hopefully I can avoid kick that stuff down the road a little while longer. Even though they keep telling me knee replacement, hip replacement, I'm like, not yet. So the beginning of COVID 3 years ago, I noticed the other day that on my Facebook memories, it came up with some memories, like a picture of the bank. I'd taken a picture of the bank, the inside of the bank, looking through the doors 3 years ago, because Costa Rica started limiting the number of people could be in the bank, all kinds of different things. And then they closed the borders. And I was nervous about it because we were coming due for a border run. And one of the important things about a border run is it resets your driver's license. So they have to accept your driver's license. So I pushed my husband like a mule to do a border run, and we did one day before it closed. The importance of that was because of the driver's license, because Costa Rica, right after that, said, and we're not honoring the driver's licenses of anyone that didn't do a border run, but the border is closed. So they could actually give you a ticket for that. So there was a lot of just really horrible stuff that just went down within days. They shut down. So this is a good point to remember Kenneth Copeland. He did a sermon right about the time that COVID hit big. that has blown up into one of those remixes that makes me laugh the hardest. I have a link to it in the description. It's him blowing away COVID and saying that heat destroys it. God told him heat destroys it. None of his believers would have any problem with it. They get it, and he would heal them instantly, and just so much stuff. Knitter, please. If he killed it, then it wouldn't have busted out in places like Costa Rica where it's 90 degrees every single day. And I remember in those early days seeing stuff about using your blow dryer on your nose, just utterly ridiculous things that spilled out of Evangelical town. And I'm not sure what it is about science that is such a challenge to so many in the non-denominational evangelical world, but science seems to be a real biggie. And I don't get it because I believe in science. I believe in having a knee replacement if you need it. I believe in that stuff. I'm not praying, not saying that God can't heal you. I've seen God move in some mighty ways. But God also put doctors on this earth. So whether it's a doctor that heals you, or it's whether a doctor is involved, not a doctor healing you, whether a doctor is involved or God heals you directly, it's all good. So the semantics. So I have laughed so hard every time I've viewed that Kenneth Copeland COVID-19, because he has a whole line of ministers behind him and they're echoing everything he's saying. It was like, those are the lousiest hype men I've ever seen. He's yelling, COVID-19. They're going, COVID-19 behind him. And it's just so much cringe. So I started doing a deep dive. And when I saw that $5 billion, that $1 billion possible figure, I was like, what? Let's look at this. Kenneth Copeland, born in 1936. So this is not a young man we're talking about. He has apparently always been in some type of ministry from the time he was younger. I didn't realize it, but he is on wife number 3. Now, they've been married 59 years, Gloria Copeland, which she also does her own ministry things and jointly with him. He has a whole pile of shows on different religious channels. He has private jets galore. There's been a ton of controversy. Everybody seems to forget that he's divorced 3 times, yet his son had to step down from the ministry for being divorced. So it's a truly just an ultra fascinating look at the squishy moral lines that you find in evangelicalhood, where they say, this is wrong, but I did it. But it wasn't wrong for me to do it. You see a lot of that. I see a lot of that with a lot of these guys. What's remarkable about Copeland is he is a prosperity gospel guy, and he is hardly the only one. There are some from the minor, like Lance Wallnau, who I've got to talk about one day. He sat under his teachings and heard them, and it was pretty bizarre. To my husband's favorite, Kenneth yelled at the girl from Inside Edition, Lisa. It scared me. I thought he was going to hit her. He does come across as a super angry dude. He does. Like he's a control freak, controlling everything and everyone. And all these guys are like that. They have control issues, a lot of them. I remember back when I was going to my evangelical church, my best friend Joni and I talking about our pastor having control issues. If only we had known then that he is like minor league control issues compared to everybody else. So Copeland believes that you have to give. Lance is in there with Jim Baker. Yeah, I know he is. And I have things to say about Jim Baker. I love my friend Joni, but she loves Jim Baker and has bought thousands of dollars worth of his dehydrated food for end times. And when she did that, I was like, Joni, what are you going to do for water? Please tell me what you're going to do for water if Armageddon happens. And I picked at her a number of times for things like having a little pink pistol that she says is going to save her in those days. I said, Joni, if we get Armageddon like people are saying, and the entire world goes to hell in a handbasket, it's going to be armed biker gangs fighting over a squirrel carcass, and they're going to take that pink pistol away from you ASAP. I love her, but sometimes she's not very practical. So Copeland has since 1967, he has done a ton of 3 to 6 day conventions or conferences throughout the US. And one of the things I know about conferences, for having attended these things so many times, even at revival spots, it's not free. You go to these things and you pay this hefty little sum right up front to even go in there and hear the exalted words of whoever. And there's 1,000 trillion different trinkets to buy. There's all kinds of books and teachings being promoted by whoever is doing the speaking. It can be super expensive when you start doing those things. And when I see those things, I start thinking there's an element of the prosperity gospel going on. So this has been a grift, and I'm going to call it a grift. I think this man is a grifter for very obvious reasons, even though there are a lot of people that think that Copeland is the word of God. Well, let's talk more about that. He has been on television stations like God TV and Daystar Television Network. Parts of the conferences are recorded and shown on TV. He's got his Monday through Friday television broadcasts, discussing, books, things of the Bible. There's Believer's Voice of Victory, Word of Faith at one time, and something called the Prayer Group. It's pretty crazy. When I started reading through the possessions, he owns at least 6 airplanes, it looks like. Fake channel by Marshmallow. Don't let the door hit you in the rear end on the way out the door. This is not for everybody, I know, but anybody that likes Copeland is seriously deceived. But here's the thing about being deceived. If you're deceived, you don't know it. That's one of those things that I can say for sure from having lived through this stuff. If you're deceived, you don't know it. You might realize there's some things that are squishy and weird around the edges, but you don't know it. He owns at least 6 airplanes, some of them jets, and there's been controversy around the ownership of the planes. Not that he owns the planes, but some of the things that he's done as far as taking them hither and yon and taking various flights off as 100% ministry oriented. He's taken his friends all over the world on some of these planes, and they've just happened to have layovers in spots like Fiji, Maui, and other Hawaiian islands. And you look at that and you're like, he's claiming that the pilot needed rest or else that he was speaking somewhere in there. And you're just looking at that and going, why does the IRS bust this guy on this stuff? One thing that's interesting about Copeland is he is litigious. He has turned around and sued various people. Afternoon, Reverend. I know that. So you just missed a Fundy Town shower-upper. So he has taken these things all over the place. He's fought with the IRS. He's fought with the Tarrant County various commissioners, especially when they wouldn't recertify one of his ministry. So he goes after all this crap. I think one of the most egregious things that he did was there was one point. Do you remember the earthquake in Haiti? I remember the earthquake in Haiti because we had at that time a sister church to my old church ministry, giving them money, having them minister at our church, raising money, doing all kinds of crap through the years. And I'm not saying the ministry wasn't a good thing, because it did have its good things. It did feed a lot of kids that weren't getting fed any other way. They did, medical clinics and things like that. I'm all for feeding people and treating their ailments. I'm all about that. And if you can educate somebody in the meantime, that's a good thing too. But what happened with the earthquake is I remember that the school church was completely destroyed, and I believe the main minister died. And we ended up having to raise more money and going back to Haiti. But at the same time, other ministries were claiming to raise money to go to Haiti. Copeland got in trouble because he was doing all his appeals to raise money to fly to Haiti to do disaster relief. And while I'm not a big fan of many ministries, hello, Duggars and Bates, and your little medical thing that you do that I think is ridiculous in some ways, Copeland used the Haiti earthquake to raise lots of funds, and they never went to Haiti to do any kind of disaster relief. They used the money to repair an airplane, according to a spokesperson. So they got a lot of criticism for that. I think the thing that drives me the craziest about Kenneth when I started doing reading through all of this, he preaches, let me read this. He preaches a prosperity gospel and is part of the Word of Faith movement. Copeland has written that parishioners will, quote, will get, quote, a hundredfold return on their investment through giving to God through him. That, my friends, is the heart of prosperity gospel. There is some truth to the axiom that you give and it can come back to you in so many fold. There's some truth to that. But I don't think that there's ever been linked to give to this ministry and this will happen. That is the seed money BS. Exactly. That's another name for it. The seed money. And there have certainly been times in my life where I've given money and it's come back. But it had nothing to do with any particular minister or faith or anything else. I get hit up all the time for money still to this day, and I will give some. But here's the thing. Anytime you give, I'm going to throw this out here, this blows up the prosperity gospel. You don't give to get back. You give because you want to give, and A and B, you don't expect anything in return, even when you lend people money. It's always been my belief and the way I operate that when I give, whether it is a gift or a quote loan, I don't expect to get the money back. I don't expect to get any benefit. I expect I'm just giving the person or the ministry money for whatever reason. And if they are blessed by it, that's usually enough. I heard Kenneth was telling people not to get the vaccine. We're going to address that too. He definitely has said that. So the seed money thing, he pushes that hard. He always has these different things he's asking for money for. And it's been found that the money's not always spent as he has said it should be spent. Now, I don't begrudge him making money on books of his and that sort of thing. Hey, everybody's got their hustle that they can do and they can make money on. I hear a lot of people criticize Joel Osteen for living in $1 million mansion or so many $1 million mansion. But here's the thing about Osteen. Osteen has had many, many super successful books. And he doesn't take a dime from his ministry as far as in payment. He doesn't take a salary. He just lives off his book things. That's a little bit different than these guys that are like, give me money for going to Haiti, and then they don't spend it on going to Haiti. Those guys who are demanding you pay for them and theirs to do, they're not very nice people. I'm just going to say that. And I almost feel kind of scared for them because if they believe what they are saying about the Lord and what he'll do to various people for lying and stuff, it's like, how can you espouse that and then do what you're doing? You're just such a hypocrite because you could easily get you could easily get squashed like a bug by the God of the universe you're claiming to believe in that pays people back for this stuff. And it's like, ooh, no. So, besides claiming that the pandemic had ended, it would soon end, and his followers would be instantaneously healed of the virus because of him, he also told people they had to keep giving their tithes and giving even more during the pandemic, even if they lost their jobs. He had to keep pushing the whole seed theology thing where you got to keep giving to receive, got to keep giving to receive the blessings. That's not at all what Jesus said. I keep circling back to the word of Jesus with these guys and the words of Jesus, and I just cannot even. The vaccine controversy, they were with Kenneth Copeland, and I just need to throw out there quickly. He's got a Bible college. He's got a Bible college. He's got his own television channel now called the Victory Channel. In 2022, he started a program called Flashpoint. And Flashpoint hosted a lot of political figures like Mike Lindell and Donald Trump. And even farther back than that, Copeland got in trouble for supporting Mike Huckabee and allowing Mike Huckabee on his channel for free when Mike Huckabee was running for president. And Senator Grassley tried to see that they were all held accountable and held a hearing, all that, and it just all went by the wayside because Kenneth Copeland Ministries was one of 4 that would not even cooperate in the slightest. So they had nothing solid, just hearsay evidence, so they had to drop it. So this idea that church and state is supposed to be kept separate has been severely trampled during the last couple of elections. But it always has, but in a more way that is more subtle. Back when I was at my old church, every single time there was an election, a national or state election, I should say, we would get these little voting guides that would put them on every seat in the pews. And they were from Intercessors from America for America, which is an organization I used to support. I used to buy a lot of their books and different things. They're based out of Leesburg, Virginia, near where one of my kids was living for a while. And it wouldn't say you must vote for this person because this other person is demonic. What they would do is it was far more subtle. They would break down what they believed, and it would only be the kind of topics that would only appeal to an evangelical voter. So they were kind of telling you who to vote for. My husband was so uncomfortable with that. He finally spoke to the minister and said, please stop. Please stop. You might lose your 501c. Is that it? Designation. And they finally moved the voting guides to the very back of the church on the rack where they had all this different literature you could pick up. But Copeland has made no secret of his attempts to just trample all over that crap. And he claimed that things that had happened, including like Grassley's attempt to have the committee hold him responsible, was Satan doing these things because we've stepped out from under God's umbrella of protection by touching God's anointed prophet. And employees of his have always been encouraged to shun and treat badly anybody that speaks out. We just saw evidence of that. 501c3. That's it. I kept thinking there's a 3 in there somewhere, but I couldn't remember. And Cheryl, yeah, they think they're stronger than God. They think and in fact, they've supplanted God with their behaviors. And you can tell what they really believe in. I believe that with Copeland, that Mammon Money is his prophet, not God. It's what he's worshiping. He may deny that, but it's pretty obvious. And he's gotten really good at blowing the dog whistles and pushing the buttons. Confess that meth. I guess that's his newer sets of sermons. So they've had a couple of different vaccination controversies. They had one in 2013 because there was a breakout of measles right around their little group in Texas. And they were accused of saying you shouldn't get your children vaccinated against rubella, the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. I'm old enough. I'm older than dirt. I remember before we had these life-saving vaccines. I actually had measles as a child the year before the vaccine came out, and I remember very little. I just remember being super feverish and being covered with a rash and how miserable I was. And my mother tells me I was sick for a good month or so, and they didn't know what was going to happen. So I remember that. I would have been really, really young, maybe 3 when that happened. Now, the measles thing and the vaccinations, the press said it was the anti-vaccination sentiments expressed by members of Copeland's ministries. They accused the Copelands of directly saying this stuff. And the church got very upset. They said they never made any such statements, and that they urged their members to get vaccinations, and that they even offered vaccination clinics to their church. This was Pastor Terry Copeland's daughter, that was saying these things, and she was the one that offered the vaccination clinics and advised those who did not attend the clinics to quarantine themselves at home for 2 weeks. Then she gave an updated statement to that, said that the only reason they were even slightly against the vaccination was because of the autism risk to younger children, that they had no problem with older children getting the MMR, but it was just the younger children. And she cited that mercury, I got to look at the word because it's not one that I remember much. It's been so many years. Thimerosal. I've got to find that video. I saw one debunking that. So here we are again, COVID times. Everything new is old again and circles back around. And Copeland is saying not to get, well, everything I've seen seems to show not to get the COVID vaccination. Why? Because of the whole issues of it being a biologic-based medicine. Now, for me, you caught all the diseases of the 1950s. I had childhood friends that died of these illnesses. Cheryl, I have family members that died of these illnesses before all of these vaccinations became available. When I saw and heard that the COVID vaccinations are going to be based on the research on the biologics that have been rDNA technology that they had been using in the last 20 years or so with medicine, I had no problem with it. But I have a little bit of a different take than the average person on that. For 8.5 years, I received a drug called Xolair for my mast cell disorder. It is an injection. It's a biologic. It's made from other people's DNA. Oh, and I can tell you, no long-term effects, none. Now, I can't say that with these COVID vaccinations, because the COVID vaccinations are very much like our flu vaccinations, where they have to take a look and figure out where this thing is going, what variants are going to happen. So that's been a real problem. And people like the Copelands have done the world a huge disservice by making all these claims about vaccinations being harmful. And throwing all these things into question. Like I said, they've been using biologic medicines a long time now. Do they have all the kinks worked out? No. I used to get a terrible headache every time I got mine because I could literally feel when the drug crossed my blood-brain barrier. I could just feel it because I would have this terrible pounding headache and feel the weird creeping in the back of my head. But all I ever do is throw in 2 Tylenols and run around. So, this is the damage these guys do because they are opposed to any kind of vaccination, even the Johnson and Johnson non are the Johnson and Johnson one, which was on the lines of a traditional vaccine. A lot of people believe them and did not get the vaccinations. Now, I'm not saying nobody was harmed by vaccinations. There were always harmful vaccinations to a certain percentage of the public. It just happens. Not everybody is going to react the same to everything. I took that first shingles shot, the very first one, because I used to get shingles. And my immunologist said, let's try you with the shingles vaccination. Maybe it will turn your shingles off. I got the first one. I had a very bad reaction. I kept fainting. My blood pressure would go in my shoes. I had typical. Um, I had a severe reaction to it and ended up having to go to the ER for treatment. And I found out then all about the vaccine adverse reaction reporting service. And I didn't get the second one. That was over 10 years ago. I have not had shingles since. Never will I get a shingles in vaccination. It's too big of a risk after the reaction I had. I'm sure they secretly have gotten their shots. Cheryl, I think so too. They're like the people at Fox News that were on the channel talking all the time about the evil of the vaccinations, the COVID vaccinations, but not saying that Fox News required all of their workers, everyone in the building, to get the jab or not come in. So I think that's the way it is in a lot of these ministries do. So because we had so many people that didn't understand how vaccines works, didn't understand that there's always going to be a small population that's going to react badly, and that's what the vaccine adverse reporting thing is for. And there's also a fund to help pay for care for those people who have severe reactions. They don't understand anything about those types of things, and they weren't injecting you with a chip. That's the most ridiculous thing. So because of people like the Copelands, a lot of people skipped it. A lot of people, like I said, that don't understand the realities of science and how these things are working. Oh, good for him, Angela. So a lot of people skipped it. And now here we are going into year 4 of the pandemic because people refused to do what was necessary to shut this thing down. Even in 1918, when we had the forerunner to this thing, when we had this, what they called the Spanish flu, which wasn't the flu and didn't come from Spain, even then there was fight over whether or not to mask or any of that, but not like there is now. And this thing is just keeps stretching on and on and on. Like I said, I caught it. I'm fully vaccinated, and I caught it back in October. I was diagnosed on Halloween day. And I'm very careful. Very careful. I mask. I wash my hands. I use my hand sanitizer. I get vaccinated fully. So I lay this crap at the feet of these guys like him. Copeland is absolutely complicit in this nonsense. It's one thing if you don't want to get the vaccination. It's another thing when you start pretending that this thing is not real. Oh. So Copeland's also been criticized for his copious use of private jets. He's got a ton of luxury cars, and he's got homes that are worth many millions of dollars. And I used to like Jesse Duplantis, but once he and Copeland started defending their use of private jets as a necessity instead of flying commercial. And they both called flying commercial getting in a long tube, metal tube filled with demons. No, I routinely fly because I live 3 hours away from the States now by airplane. And I can honestly say that I've been lucky in my 6 years living here because I haven't encountered too much problems with flying. Not air turbulence, not anything like that, not crazy passengers. The only thing I've ever had happen in those years that I might even consider remotely in the realm of demons is one time I had a drunk guy sitting behind me who was too drunk to really sit up. They were questioning him before the flight took off, and he couldn't speak. He could only grunt. His friend was giving the answers. And he kept trying to put his bare feet in my lap. He was so drunk that when he finally did come to a little bit, he started running around the plane and doing crazy stuff. The flight attendants called for a doctor. Is there a doctor on board the plane? I've never seen that before. And there was. The doctor gave him oxygen, just made him crazier. He started yodeling and running around and trying to sit on the flight attendant seats and stuff. And it was awful because we landed at Reagan National Airport. I had to wait until the local police came and took him off the plane, arrested him. And when I got off, I had to rescue my suitcases from the airline. I was not a happy camper, but that's the only thing I can say is even remotely to his demons. And I'm not seeing that. Oh, that and the time I got to watch the one of the pilots freak out and quit with American Airlines last year. That was pretty funny. There's a lot of cursing and running around and flipping the double birds and screaming about nothing in this world is worth the amount of hours and things they're working. God bless that poor man. I don't know what ever happened to him. But the demon thing, and he has still said some horrible things about the COVID. He tried to claim it was just the weakest strain of the flu. He started fighting with other pastors who canceled their services, their in-person services. Tried to claim it had ended when it had just started. Said that God told him that it would soon be over because Christians' prayers had overwhelmed COVID. And the whole thing with making people, advising his people to keep tithing even if they lost their jobs. It was just crazy. And he kept hosting conventions through all of this. Even if there were local restrictions on religious gatherings, he would still do these things. Sean Fouch, however you say his name, the guy from Bethel that was running around doing these huge concerts where it was known that they were kind of super spreader events. They were able to trace some of the things. So all these guys that were trying to claim this was no big deal just infected a whole lot of people. Got to be a special place in hell for that. After the 2020 presidential election, Copeland led his followers to have a huge laugh and to pray that Trump would take his rightful place and said that the Biden election was invalid. And I was looking, he has a long list of publications. Pretty interesting. He had a hit record at one point, which was kind of funny if you think about it. A hit record. Go back to that because I kind of laughed at that. I thought that was really a freaky part of something. Oh, here it is. Pledge of Love. It was on the Billboard Top 40 and it charted in at number 17 and it was on there for 15 weeks. I'm not sure it had anything to do with his religion, so I'm going to have to look that up. Listen to it. In 1967, he was a student at Oral Roberts University, and he became Oral Roberts chauffeur and pilot. This is where I think he learned some of his grifting skills. He also attended Kenneth Hagin's pastor seminars many times, apparently. And he's claiming he took 100 around to that thing where he said, "Give till it hurts, and you'll be blessed." If a minister ever tells you this, know that this is definitely not a God thing. This is a man thing, just to enrich his own self, to fill his pockets. No decent man of God would say that. But that, like I said, that seems to be a feature with a lot of these guys. He's not a spring chicken now. He would be, 86, I think. So it's a pretty good age. And I don't think that he is going to be around forever. I do find it ironic. He's been married 3 times. He's still doing this stuff. Yet his son got kicked out of the ministry for being divorced once. I heard the give till it hurts from more churches. I'd care to say, Reverend, myself too. So many of these places, this is how they operate. And my old church, not my last church, but my old church, my original church, it wasn't so much that happened after I left. The pastor sent an email around saying the church was out of money and that people were not tithing. We left and we'd been fully tithing. I know a number of other people that left had been fully tithing, but as the church got weirder and weirder, they took a hike and took their tithe elsewhere. And eventually it had enough of effect on the old church that the pastor called a mandatory community-wide meeting. He sent around an email that I got a copy of after I left, speculating on who made what amount of money and what their tithe should be. He just kind of outed it to everybody in the church, who was tithing, who wasn't, and how much it was going to be required from each person. I didn't go to that meeting. Like I said, I had already moved on to the Methodist church by then, but I know a ton of people that did. There was a lot of contentiousness and fighting. And eventually the pastor took himself off because there was just no more money to pay him. And he had 2 house notes and a ton of stuff that had to be paid for, including his tuition and travel to Master's Seminary in Los Angeles with John MacArthur. Oh, so now you know how much nonsense. I can't figure out from looking at him exactly how much Botox, hair dye, toupee that he has going on, but something is. You can just look at the false facade that some of these guys put on and go, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting money on this stuff? And it's really a shame. But it has created a mindset in people. Like, I know people here who need to have surgery that cannot have that surgery because they're evangelical Christians who have decided that the world owes them money to do these things. And I'm just like, no, get a job like the rest of us. Get health insurance. I have no issue with tithing. I have an issue with churches forcing it. Cheryl, same. If you want to tithe, that is your prerogative. But when ministers start saying you must tithe and how much, that's when it becomes a problematic thing, a very problematic thing. It ended up pretty much imploding my old church. That was the thing that took it down. Because after our pastor left, there was nobody to run the church. They kept getting pastors straight out of missionary out of the seminary, and they still couldn't keep it together. It was just an exercise in futility until finally they got bought out by an Al Mohler plant. Oh, So I sat under some of these guys, including Lance Wall now, who I'm going to do one day soon, because Lance has done some super crazy stuff. And one of the things that he came up with is he grabbed the old idea of the Seven Mountain Mandate and made it mainstream back in the early 2000s. That was the point where I ended up going to more than a few conferences where he was one of the speakers. And I had something else to say, but I don't remember what it was now. Just about the tithing and how money ruins everything. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. That pastor that I sat under that eventually left after speculating everybody's, one of the things that he did that I kind of laughed about at the time, and my friend Jody and I were talking about it quite a bit. He printed out this huge thing on his computer that said, cease from your murmuring and complaining in like full high letters. And he put it over the back doors of the church. So when you turned to leave, that was the first thing you saw was this big sign ordering you to cease your murmuring and complaining. And God knows there was a ton of murmuring and complaining in my old church. And everybody would run their mouths. Nothing would get resolved. Nobody had the guts enough to confront the pastor about things they thought that were wrong. And I saw this happen at my Tamarindo church, the original church I was going to here, where they took down a pastor with this murmuring and complaining nonsense, a good guy that was very humble and not anything like a lot of these guys. And now there's nobody there as the pastor, not for 2 years now. And they've done a lot of horrible stuff. I'm not saying that they haven't done some good, because there was some good that came out of it, but not much. And I'm sitting back here post-church watching everybody church hop for various dumb reasons. Just going, oh man. So how do we want to have faith going forward? One of the things that has been so encouraging to me the last, I guess, 6 months or so, I was in deconstruction for a long time. And I finally, maybe 6 months ago, got to where I felt like I had deconstructed down to the bedrock, and had swept it clean. And it was just a bedrock foundation that was clean and empty and ready to be rebuilt. And I feel like I've been rebuilding over the last 6 months. I found a number of very precious brothers and sisters, some Christians, some not, that have been instrumental in that. And almost to a man and or woman, we're all looking at all of this stuff going, oh man, this is not God at all. I remember after Billy Graham died, there were so many nasty things said about him. Angela, there was one thing. When he died, we were all ordered at Pathos to write about it. And we were all ordered to do our own take. Well, Billy Graham, my father hated Billy Graham. Hated him. And I never could figure out why when I was a kid. Because, well, first I was a kid. I finally picked up on it as an adult as I thought about my memories of my father more. He would always say, look at Billy Graham up there in a $300 suit. This was like in the mid to late 60s. I think what he was responding to is the same thing that a lot of people respond to to these prosperity gospel ministers, that they are living large where everybody else is struggling. Now, we weren't struggling. My father worked at banks for years and years and years. He eventually ended up as a bank president. We never went without. In fact, I didn't know what real want was until my family disowned me when I was like 15. And I got to experience poverty firsthand instead of as an abstract concept in a book. But my father, I think it just burned him up. It galled him that Billy Graham was flying around the world in fancy suits and doing and saying all this stuff and presenting this perfect picture of Christianity was. So the piece I wrote for Pathos was, I said, Billy Graham did a lot of good, because obviously he did. But at the same time, he was as fully human as you and I. And that meant also that he had some of the same things that we're prone to. I think with Billy Graham, as far as I could tell, one of the biggest things that he did that was not so good was he wasn't around much for his children. And he's admitted that. And his children have said things about it as well. And I think that was his personal failure. But then again, I'm not going to beat him up too badly for that, because we all have those things. I know I do. And the point of Christianity is not to go, look at me, my $300 suit, my $60,000 jet, none of that. It is to reflect the grace, loving kindness, and forgiveness of the Lord. And part of that is going to be holding these guys accountable when they're doing this stuff. I don't think anybody should be given a pass for exploiting others. And I think Copeland et al., that's their thing. That is their thing. That's their shtick. Like I said, I actually fear for them if they actually are 100% right about who Christ and God is. They're facing a terrible judgment day. And with that, I'm going to leave you. It's just been one of those kind of weeks and days. I chased a chicken out of my yard earlier because it was a baby that had gotten lost, and the mother was crying the next thing over. So I've had my excitement. Now I get to have my daily routine. Love you guys so much. Appreciate you. Those of you that would show up and tell me that I'm demonically out of the water, get in line. The only thing that's going to happen is I'm going to move your comments to Jerks for Jesus and keep on keeping on. There's an old Arabic proverb that states, the dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. I have embraced that as one of those things in my life that I look to. You can criticize. You could say that those of us that are no longer believing the way we once did, that you're still believing, is demonic. But no, I think we are rebuilding the church. A lot of people are. I mean, we're saying we need to be held accountable for some of this crap. If I was running around with a diamond studded 14 karat gold hot tub with a mink lining and saying, Jesus gave me this, I would hope that somebody would be kind enough to say, now, wait a minute. That has nothing to do with your faith. Okay, you guys, I'm really going this time. Love you.